Hi, I'm Christer Karlsson. I'm a professor at Copenhagen Business School and director of our platform, a Business in Society platform on competitiveness. So I'll be happy to talk to you a little about productivity and competitiveness and related issues. So let's start with just the overview. This is what it looks like. We go from concepts and understanding to the objectives of production, and that to what's happening in our environment, and then to how we organize production, and finally how do we measure the objectives and what we perform in production. Let me start with the very often used concepts like productivity, efficiency and effectiveness, and then we'll come to competitiveness. I won't go into any detail, but if we start looking at productivity, it's really a ratio between what you get out in relation to what you put in, normally in volumes. We move it up to efficiency, then it's about what the quality of what we get out. It's the output quality. There's a little problem with the Scandinavian language. We don't differ between efficiency and effectiveness, but here we talk about effectiveness. Then we relate it to what are the objectives of the performance. So, for example, it can be how placed the customers are, rather than just not how many we produce. So these are some key concepts. Now, I want to move to competitiveness because it's more important for me. I think that's the ultimate capability. It doesn't help to be productive. Productivity is one factor in the system, but it's not enough. Qualifying a supplier and winning the order is really the ultimate objective. Then you are competitive. Doesn't matter how good you are if you don't win the order. So it's a matter of beating the competitors. It takes us a little bit further than just productivity. And we'll talk a little bit more about the details in that. When we look at operations or production, we say that we compete with operations in 5 ways. First of all, we do things right. We have quality. Secondly, we do things fast. That's another alternative. Then we have speed. Then we can be on time to be dependable, have dependability. And then if we are that, we can even be flexible, do different things, mix between products. And finally, we can be cost effective. And that's really what the term is productivity and productive is about. So that's how we compete. And together, by balancing this, we'll come back to that, we create competitiveness. So let's look into that. How do we create competitiveness? Here's the overall view. The key thing is to be qualifying for an order and then win the order. To do that, we have these capabilities, quality, effectiveness, dependability, and so on. And then we earn money, we sell, we get margins, we grow, and so on. But to build this, we need to have some capabilities or competencies depending on what resources we have. Physical, human, organization, systems, and so on. Then we have to put this in context. How competitive we are depends on our type of firm, the technologies, the high or low tech, or the size of our firm, and so on. And also what industry we are in. Is that a very competitive industry or not? How is the relation to suppliers and customers and so on? And then we have the context or environment. Normally the country we work in, and there are a lot of factors up there: economic development, deployment, political systems, institutions, taxes, education, and a lot of these factors create the opportunities for us. Now, please don't mix up the competitiveness of a country, which is about these top factors, and the competitiveness of a company, which are in here. Actually, there is a limited correlation between those two. If you look at the competitiveness of countries in the world, you find that those on the top are not those where you normally locate manufacturing, while those who are between 25 and 60 are the best manufacturing countries. So watch out for the conclusion there. Now, as we said, these capabilities make us get orders, and we win money, and we build up our competencies like that. And we take into account these two conditions of the industry and who we are. So that's really putting competitiveness in context. Now, there is one little more comment about this, and that is what leads to what. If we are good at all these things, if we are good at competitiveness, doing these things, then we'll earn money. So there is a relation there. On the other hand, if we are good at earning money, we can also develop our quality and dependability and speed and so on. So there's a double relation. So competitiveness can be seen both as an independent and a dependent factor. And now we really say that this is much more than productivity. When we analyze compatibility or competitiveness, then we talk about normally these 5 dimensions, and we do a profile. So here's our company that we have located. We say we are quite good at being cost effective, not so good at flexibility, and here we have a competitor that we have in red. They are much better at flexibility, much better in speed, a little bit better in quality, but not so cost effective. But they can still compete in another way. So then we set up some objectives. How do we want to develop the production system? So the required performance would be our objectives for the next couple of years. How do we develop that? And we'll come back to that later, how you develop your competitiveness. Now, there are a lot of things happening around this system. Globalization, everybody talks about. In this case, it's especially interesting to think about the fact that we sell globally, but we also procure or buy. And that's what others do as well. So we are really in a global competitive situation. Rate of innovations increase, development cycles are shortened. A new factor is that we realize that our type of countries can very often not compete on simple components, so we compete on very complex products or very complex production systems, and sometimes those two in combination. We have a global perspective on division of work. That is really the theory behind why we go global, why we offshore, why we outsource, and so on. We allocate things where it's best for our total system. So we deploy or allocate production, product development, management, where we find that to be best. And we then shift economy of scale from plant to global because our plants are just one piece in the total system. Now we organize production. The economy of scale moves from production to products and product development because it's so expensive to develop global products. Technology integration, doing complex things, replaces narrow specialization. We more and more compete with complexity. We outsource, as we say in networks. Outsource at the moment within goose eyes because I don't like the word, I'll come back to that. We do it vertically in hierarchies because some experts have economy of scale, technology and knowledge and so on. And it gives us flexibility, so we're not tied up. And of course the classic thing about reduced capital base. Then horizontally, that means we actually very often collaborate with competitors. A partner, we call them, they have economy of scale on a specific competence, and it's okay as long as the profile is not overlapping, so we don't compete with ourselves. So that happens more and more also. Now, the effect of all this is this. I call it the extra price. I also have to invent words. So it's instead of the enterprise, and here is actually based on an analysis I did of a big global company, the OEM, original equipment manufacturer, and we looked at where is product development done and found out that about 15% was done in here. Otherwise in joint ventures and partners, a big owner, a system of suppliers, sub-suppliers and so on, and also other manufacturers, direct actually competitors that we work with. So this is today, I'll come back to that, this is really the challenge of managing this all the time. And not only this little blue box in there. It's a limited part of what we call production management. So then we come to the performance measurements. And now we start at the top. So we have some overall strategic objectives. We break them down in functional areas, marketing, operation, finance, and so on. And then we very often, I can guarantee you, in companies go to this lowest level. We look at, for example, this productivity thing. Labor productivity. How much do we get out of a worked hour? How much do we get out of the machine? How many hours do they operate and so on? Then, that's one line. The other line is here is order lead time and throughput time. I'll come back to that these are related to each other. But they are also in conflict. So there is a risk here when we go to very detailed measures that we actually create a conflict in what we want to do. So therefore we want to see above that the generic measures I talked about earlier, quality, dependability, speed, flexibility and cost. And we can even go to a higher level in the organization, what we call composite performance measures. So it's very important to have this pyramid or hierarchy in mind all the time, and you have all of them, because then we'll discuss the trade-off between this. For example, as I said, reducing cost here may, not necessarily, may cause that it takes extra time with queues and so on. Or the opposite, if we want to get through very fast, we maybe have to spend some more on the production system. So we put all this into a hierarchy that we call the objectives hierarchy, and that's why we set the objectives on how do we want to compete. So that was the whole thing. We started with concepts and understanding, with the words of productivity, efficiency, effectiveness, and competitiveness. I underlined the difference with different levels, national, firm level, industry level, and so on, that we have to find out how do we want to compete. And then we have the production objectives, how to compete with production, fast, flexible, effective, and so on, to position ourselves, everything is relative in relation to our competitors, and build up the capabilities for competing in exactly that way. And there we have industry and country specifics that we have to take into account. Then we looked at the overall situation with globalization, global competition, global purchasing, and so on, and that there are new actors out there in that system. Then we came to organizing production. The plant, how do we build it? The division of work, which used to be in the plant, now it's a global thing. So we have deployment of activities, vertical dimension, suppliers, horizontal with partners, and we look especially then at how we create resources, and that is done then in a network. And the current, really in management, is management of networks rather than management of just organizations. And finally, we came to the measures and objectives, the performance measures, the levels of aggregation within the firm and up to the national situation, the relations between them, and that are actually conflicts, and that we have to deal with what we then call the trade-offs between them. That's all actually. I just want to give you this final favorite slide of mine. Speed has become so important, so I say that in the extra price world, only the fast and the dead. Thank you.